how's it going? My name is Jay and welcome to the channel, and welcome back to October Lake in Planet Zoo, a project where we're building this really large wildlife park situated in the Canadian Highlands. In today's episode, we're going to be building a habitat for a pair of common warthogs. If that does sound good to you, and if you do like today's episode, please do consider leaving a like on the video, and of course, do subscribe for more Planet Zoo content. Now, with the intro out of the way, let's start talking about what it is we're going to be doing. So as you can see, we've had this little bit of a kind of a triangular type space here between where the African penguins are and the large savanna habitat. And initially I did consider just putting the warthogs in the big savanna habitat. They would coexist perfectly fine with the other animals in there. They would have more space and stuff. But I thought, you know what, it would be a nice way to fill this space out because it is a reasonable enough space for the warthogs. It's about double the minimum requirement, which is nice. And they're not particularly big animals. I always forget this, but warthogs are not like gigantic by any means. They're about 100 kilograms at max, which is about the weight of like an adult human, I think. I don't but you know, they're not particularly massive by any means. So I thought this little habitat would be a nice little fit for them, and by the end it does fit them pretty reasonably. I think it's not too small by any means. And it looks quite nice, fills out the area nicely, and I think having the warthog separate as well helps to kind of emphasize the uniqueness of this species as a standalone thing, I guess. I don't know, by the end of the day I think it just generally looks quite nice, and I like the style of this habitat. It's a bit different from what we've been doing so far with the other habitats. It's more based with plaster and stone instead of the wood pieces that we've really been using a lot. I really make use of the mesh pieces as well. I've been obsessed with them ever since we got them with the most recent update. Those mesh pieces are the best, honestly. Such amazing pieces. Really glad to use them. Also built them the warthogs a little bit of a more modern shelter here, which I think turns out to look quite nice. In fact, to be really honest, this habitat started out as an aardvark habitat. I thought I'd introduce the aardvarks because they fit the theme quite well. You know, it's nice to have another smaller kind of small African animal, because of course this area was initially called Little Africa because of all the tiny animals. And I thought about it and I thought, okay, maybe we'll save the aardvarks and put them somewhere a bit closer to where the meerkats are. And then over here we'll have something else that's a bit more in line with the bigger savanna habitat. So that's ended up being why we have the warthogs here. But I think they're pretty cool. I think warthogs are such an interesting animal. They're really they're like what you would usually expect to be like, you know, an animal that people don't necessarily find cute because of all the warts and the tusks and the general vibe of these animals. People, you know, might not necessarily find them the cutest, but I think they're actually really adorable, especially the babies. The babies are some of the cutest animals with those little stripes, and I think they're super cute. But yeah, shall we talk a little bit about the warthogs? Because, like I said, they're pretty interesting animals, and of course, as always with my Planet Zoo series, just talking about the animals is one of my favorite parts because they're so cool, and the animals, as I always say, are the stars of the show in Planet Zoo. So the common warthog, like I said, is relatively medium-sized. At most 100 kilograms, on average about 75 kilograms. So like I said, about the weight of a full-grown human being, kind of. The males, of course, have these massive big tusks. The females also have the tusks, but smaller. The males will engage in combat with other warthogs, and even defense with predators, and they're quite powerful to the point where they can inflict severe wounds on predators. They've seen it happen in hyenas, lions. It's you know, just those things are powerful. They're of course kind of hairy. They have this big mane on the back of their head, which is really interesting, I think. As far as their color goes, they can get quite reddish, but they're quite brown for the most part. They do graze for most of their lives. They walk around grazing on grasses, roots, berries, that sort of thing. They do snuff out roots quite a lot with that snout of theirs. And they actually occupy burrows of aardvarks, which is quite cool. So aardvarks, they do burrow to make nests. and eventually they might abandon them and move on to another burrow, but the Warthog will actually make use of that and like occupy it essentially to form their own burrow, which is quite interesting. One really cool thing as well is they actually reverse into these burrows, so their head with the big tusk are facing forward. So like if a predator comes by, they can just like burst out and like attack them, which is interesting. They also of course wallow in mud. That's one of the most common sights you might see in documentaries and stuff, is warthogs wallowing in the mud. So here we also have a mud pit for them in this habitat, and I think it's very cute. I mean, isn't that a life? Like, imagine just being able to wallow in the mud all day. That sounds like such a fun time. Just me? Okay. They're really interesting as well. They have some, I wouldn't say symbiotic species, but species that engage with them in like a mutually beneficial way, which I guess is symbiosis in some ways. It's mutualism. And so mongooses and some monkeys have been seen removing ticks and eating them from the warthogs, which is quite cool. So yeah, they're really quite interesting species, and thankfully they're not particularly endangered in the wild by any means. They are quite common, which is really nice to know. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed learning a little bit about these guys. They're just super interesting, and I think they kind of get overlooked a little bit. Of course, ever since, you know, the Lion King came out like back in the 90s, of course people were really suddenly interested in them because, like, you know, it's kind of an interesting thing about how media can affect people's perception of specific animals. Like warthogs wouldn't be considered a charismatic or like likable species, but by the standards of like media for the longest time, you know. Not saying they aren't. I love warthogs. I think they're super cool, but just in general, in terms of how they're portrayed in media, they're not necessarily portrayed as likable. And of course, the Lion King came out, and then you see Pumbaa, and like everyone's just in love with the character. And suddenly, warthogs are a much less disliked species. People are suddenly like, damn, warthogs are kind of cool. So, you know, like, yeah, it's an interesting thing to see how the perception of animals in media can influence how we perceive animals in real life. Which is, again, another thing I'm looking into in my dissertation. So, as we go forward, I'll keep talking about that at some point. Hopefully, you guys don't get too bored of all the sciencey talk. Well, I mean, is it even science? Well, of course it's science, but, you know, it's like a more of a socio-psychological science? I don't know. But yeah, as you can see here, I was actually looking into the aardvark to see whether they'd enjoy this space, but I ended up going with the warthogs because it fits them better. As you can see, the whole habitat is very triangular, almost diamond shaped really. Here I'm adding in the foraging pit and the mud pit for them. They both are completely usable. I did switch off clipping a while ago, in the menu for enrichment items, which I recommend you do if you're playing sandbox and you're not too worried about functionality. But if you're playing franchise or challenge, I would recommend you keep the clipping on, because enrichment items don't always work when you do this. They work fine now, because this is a pretty straightforward use of like just clipping the ground through them a little bit. But generally speaking, I would recommend keeping the clipping on, just so that you don't mess with the functionality of the enrichment items in like a mode where you might need them. But in sandbox, I'd say go for it, because it allows for more interesting things like this. Wish you could blend them in with the ground a little bit more, but I think that's fine. Once you add in the foliage and stuff like that, it doesn't look too odd, and it just looks like areas with slightly different terrain. Still incredibly obsessed with this drin grass that we got in the pack. Beautiful, beautiful foliage. Just love using it in every part of this area. I'm going to have to include it in some other parts of the park. Bringing back some bamboo in this part of the park as well, which I think I might add to some of these other habitats as well, just because we did have quite a bit of bamboo back in the main park, you know, on the other side of the river. And I was thinking, you know what, it'd be nice to include more bamboo as well, because it's such a nice plant that bridges that gap between like the more temperate vibe of this this actual climate and the slightly more tropical or grassland vibes of the actual habitats. But yeah, with all that being said, we're coming up to the end of the episode, so I just want to say thank you so much for watching as always. Do like the video if you did like it. Do subscribe for more Planet Zoo content, videos every Wednesday at 5 PM UK time. Thanks as always for the support. It's always been so lovely seeing all your comments and all the subscribers. We were nearly at 2,100, which is kind of amazing. It's absolutely amazing, so thank you very much for that. And as always, I will see you all in the next video. Bye!